This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, Chelek Tesvav, the 15th Chelek, Vayera base. It says in Zohar that there are three things that are still around. The Kaimu, I guess, means they're here for eternity as a testimony, to give testimony. These are they: the well of Yitzchak, the Geiral, the thing that was used to draw lots, how to divide the land of Eretz Yisrael. It was done with lottery, with a girdle. And the stone that Yeshua placed when they went over the Yarden, etc. The Rabbi doesn't elaborate on this, all three aspects of the Zohar, but he picks up just on one. And that is the Be'er of Yitzchak. Be'er of Yitzchak, where do we know? As it says in our Parsha, Parshas Vayera, that in order that it should be as a witness, I dug this well. And it says that Avraham Avinu did the ceremony with Avimelech with 7 lambs, in order it should be as testimony that I built this well. So it's not understood who built the well, who dug the well. This pasuk is speaking about the well that Avraham dug. So why does the Zohar call it the well of Yitzchak that's there always to give testimony? So the Ramaz, I was going to look up the Ramaz. The Ramaz is one of the Mefarshim on Zohar, and he answers this question and says, indeed, this pasuk is what Avraham Avinu said, but the well that Avraham Avinu dug is in actuality the well of Yitzchak. But that itself requires explanation. So what did he say? He said that even though Avram dug it, but really it was intrinsically a well of Yitzchak that Avram was digging earlier, before, so to speak, with the intention of Yitzchak. That requires explanation. How can you say about the well that Avram dug that it's a Be'er of Yitzchak? Base. The Rebbe quotes his father, who says in his notes on the Zohar, as you know that the Rebbe's father didn't have access to paper, and he was in exile in Kazakhstan. He had just a few basic svarim that the Rebbe Tzimchana managed to send him. One of them was the Zohar, and he wrote notes at the side of the pages of the Zohar. So they're obviously very short. He wrote about this, that the Be'er, the well, is being attributed to Yitzchak by the Zohar, even though that this pasuk refers to the digging of the well that Avraham dug, and that is because the Be'er, the well of Avraham, the Plishtim blocked up after Yitzchak passed. After Avraham passed away. And then Yitzchak redug it from you. As it says that Yitzchak returned once more and he redug the well. And he called them the same names as his father had called the wells. Continues that Rabbi Yitzchak in his note on the Zohar, look further about this concept in Torah of the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of Parshas Toldos. Ayin Shom, look there. And that's why it's been attributed to Yitzchak. That's a short note that the Rebbe's father left at the side of his Zohar. So the Rebbe asks, this seems to be exactly opposite to the Pirush of the Ramaz. The Ramaz was saying that really it's a Yitzchak Be'er that Avraham dug, which means that really the whole well is a Yitzchak well, just the actual digging took place with Avraham. However, from what the Rebbe's father says, comes out exactly opposite. Really, it's a well of Avraham. However, since it was stopped up, and Yitzchak redug it, therefore the Zohar is calling it the well of Yitzchak, because Yitzchak renewed the well. But really, it's a well of Avraham. So we understand that we're talking about the Pnimius, about the content of what this means on a deeper level, the digging of the wells. So both interpretations have an explanation, and they're both correct. We have to understand what's the difference between these two Pirushim, whether it's the well of Yitzchak that Avraham dug, or it's the well of Avraham which Yitzchak redug. And why, the Rebbe asks, why my father, instead of explaining what the Ramaz explained, which many times is brought down in Chassidus, the book of the Ramaz, and in the Ha'ara the Rebbe brings that even later on in elsewhere in the Rebbe's father's writings, he writes a pirush and he says, "And Baruch Hashem, Toida Lokel, thank you, thanks Hashem, shekivanti ledaita akdesha, that my explanation that I came to in another topic was exactly the way that Ramaz had explained. In other words, the Rebbe's father hadn't seen the Ramaz, that particular commentary. He came to a conclusion on his own. He says, wow, Baruch Hashem, that I came to that same conclusion. In other words, obviously, Ramaz is a well-respected pirush that's brought by Chassidus, and the Rebbe's father himself brings him. So why wouldn't he take that pirush and then explain that pirush? Rather, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak explained a totally different pirush, the exact opposite. So we could explain that my father, says the Rebbe, explained this and really alluded to this, why he's going on the path that he's going, by sending us the reference to the Torah in the beginning of Parshas Toldos. So let's take a look. The Rebbe is going to now go to the Torah of the Alter Rebbe in Parshas Toldos, and then explain, because his father said, look there, and explain why, according to that Pirush, his father explained that here it's a Be'er of Avram that's being redug by Yitzchak, and it's being called the Be'er of Yitzchak. But in reality, it's the Be'er Avram, which with I wouldn't say embellishments, but with the input of Yitzchak. Gimel. In Torah over there, Parshas Toldos, it's explained that the concept of the Aved of Avram is in the Kav of Chesed. Avram's, everybody knows that Avram is called Avram Oyhavi, as the Rebbe is about to say. So I'm going to paraphrase and then try and sum it up. So again, Gimel. It's explained that the Indian of Aved of Avram is in the mode, the Kav. Kav means a line. In the mode of Chesed, kindness, benevolence. And that is drawing down from upwards to below. And the Inyan and the Aveda of Yitzchak, think giving, think you're giving somewhere else. So it's coming down from above, below, giving. Whereas the Inyan and the Aveda, the service of Hashem in the mode of Yitzchak, is in the mode of Gevura, Gevura being severity, strictness. Ha'alo milmata l'mayla. But in terms of the emotion, it's not up from up down, it's from below going upwards. Think a very simple notion. When a person is very particular and very strict, he's trying to, you would think he's going up in the levels of self-betterment, self-refinement. And therefore, we find that by Avram, it says Avram Oyhavi. Avram is Aved. Avram is called the Avram who loves me. Hashem, he says. And by Yitzchak, it says, Upachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak. Because Ava, love, comes from the midah of chesed, benevolence, and Pachad, fear of Hashem, obviously, is from the midah of Gevura. So, according to this difference between the Aved of Avram and Aved of Yitzchak, so Alter Rebbe explains in Torah the reason why the Be'eris, the wells that Avram dug, became blocked up through the Plishtim. And Dafka, when Yitzchak redug those wells, then those very wells that Avram dug were able to have a key and were able to be sustained, because the klippa, the negativity, the enemy of Plishtim, the spiritual enemy, I'm looking for a word that says that the bar plukta, the spiritual force that stands and opposes, which is called Plishtim here, can be a opposition only to Kav Chesed, only to the Aveda that's being done in a way of Chesed, of Kedusha, and not in the mode of Gevura. What does this mean? Dalit. The explanation of this inyan is, and the Rebbe sends here in the footnotes, for all of this, in general, for all of this, look at the Torah, and there's Torah Chaim. I'm going to try and give a little bit of a, I looked in these places briefly, try and give a little bit of an outline. Avraham Avinu, so we know what Avraham Avinu's work was to spread the love of Hashem, to spread the knowledge of Hashem, to spread Hashem's love. You know that Avraham Avinu had a tent, it was open on all sides. Avraham Avinu was into hospitality. Avraham Avinu spread forth. He was not particular about who he took in. He took in even, as we say, Arvim, that time nomads, Arabs, who were worshippers of idols, and notwithstanding that they were involved in something preposterous in Avram's eyes, but he took them in and he lovingly and gently he fed them and he explained to them where everything comes from, and that they too should serve and bless Hashem. Avram was so Avram's mode was chesed. Chesed is giving. Somebody who's chesed, a chesed modality is giving. The thing is, it's very hard when you're giving, very hard to restrict the giving in a particular mode to give only to people who are deserving. When somebody's in the schwung, who's in the the mode and the mood, so to speak, of giving, so it's giving. And this was the way Avraham Avinu spread. This was his Aveda. He spread the love of Hashem to be drawn down to the world and to be available and to envelop even those people who were still skeptical and who needed to be brought near. Yitzchak represented a totally different mode of Aveda. You'll remember that Yitzchak was the one who was going to be offered as a sacrifice, totally consumed as a oila, as a upward burnt a sacrifice to Hashem. Of course, that didn't happen, but that's the direction of Yitzchak's trajectory, climbing up closer and closer to Hashem. Generally, where do we see this? If you want to ask, what was Avram's Aveda? Avram's Aveda was hospitality and chesed. What was Yitzchak's Aveda? What did you see Yitzchak occupying himself in? So even though Avram Avinu digs wells here, and we'll refer a little bit later that also Avram dug wells, but that wasn't where one saw Avram's specialty. Avram's known as the Achnasas Archim person. Yitzchak is identified as the one who was digging wells. What's unique about wells? Wells is trying to get to water that's called Mayim Tachteni, but it's also called Mayim Chayim eventually. Water that bubbles up from below. Water that bubbles up from below has a very big power. When you get to it, usually water has a downward flow. You talk about water going chesed. Water is chesed. Water goes upward from up to down. However, when we talk about the waters that come up from the earth, they're a different trajectory. They come from below. They come bursting upwards, and they're so powerful. The power of that water is so intense that it can get through earth and it can get through stone. It's very, very powerful. This was Yitzchak's Aveda. Yitzchak's Aveda was an upward Aveda that comes through intense work in uncovering what's there below, what's here below, and having it yearn and desire and be motivated to reach upwards towards Hashem. That was Yitzchak. So now let's understand, when the difference is, Yitzchak is very exacting. The Aveda of Yitzchak is Gevurah, it's very exacting, very strict, very discerning. And it wouldn't be benevolence to just anybody. It would have to be somebody who's really, really deserving of benevolence, because there's a particularness and an exactness in this equation. So now what we're going to see is that there's a possible fallout from being, generally we would think that the mode of Avram is great. It sounds more uplifting, cheery, freilach, lebedik, more lively. It's more encompassing. It's more open. It's more inviting. However, there's an issue there. What's the issue? The issue is that when one is in a mode of all-encompassing benevolence, there can sometimes be that mood, if it's not directed, it's not motivated, it's not controlled by having an openness and a benevolence and a joyousness in Hashem, in serving Hashem. That kind of personality mood can also be used to partying, to just feeling unencumbered, feeling, happy, just happy with just happy with the way you are. No need to change. Just be a jolly, leading a jolly life without any direction. And that is a danger that can come with the mode of, or the mood of the Avraham concept, right? So how do we stop that? And so let's continue here in Eis Dalet. An explanation of what we're saying. Why does the well of Avraham get stopped up by the Plishtim? Because what's Plishtim? The word Plishtim comes from the root mefulish, wide open. We know that in the laws of Shabbos, when there's a lane that's open on both sides, now it's wide open, it goes from one public thoroughfare to another public thoroughfare. There's a lane, but it's open on both sides. It's called a wide open lane. So Plishtim comes from that expression, wide open. And this is what our sages tell us. The Plishtim were leitzonim. Plishtim were jesters. They were jokers. Leitzonim, today in modern Hebrew we translate it as clowns. But no, leitzonim means cynical. There's another word I'm looking. Unencumbered by seriousness. Just going with the flow, so to speak. Leitzonim. Where does leitzonus come from? Leitzonus comes from this kind of openness, this kind of non-caringness, nonchalantness. This comes from the opening of the heart. When the heart is very open, when the person feels, unfettered, then it can lead to being unfettered also and not feeling any need to conform to any particular direction that's being asked for by Hashem. And since this concept of the digging of the wells of Avraham is the Aveda of Israchvus, of being wide open, of being all-encompassing, but from Chesed, of Kedusha, it's a mode of love and of pleasure and of joy in Elikus, in Hashem, with great intensity, much more than usual. There's this joy and this openness and this pleasure and delight. But what could be and what could come from that is the Plishtim. The Plishtim could block that up, because having that mindset and that emotional state of being, of Israchvus, of wide openness, of joy and pleasure, leaves room for a Yenika, for the sucking and the usurping of the Plishtim to use that same modality for negativity, which is opposing to Kedusha. However, that's only when, square brackets here, that's only when the opposition can only take place when Avraham is not present. In other words, when a person is actively involved with Hashem and he has this joy and he has this openness and he has this expansiveness, so then nothing can disturb that. Then the Plishtim are not going to come and take that and move him to a indulgence area in the wrong things. When that inspiration perhaps is concealed, is moved away. One of the examples is given, for example, after the person has finished the mitzvah, after the person has finished the davening, for example. So then it's possible that the state of being, emotional state of being that the person is in, of expansiveness and of open-heartedness and of feeling uplifted and so on, it could bring to the hoilalus, which means empty joy, and joy of klipa, of negativity. And that's why the pasuk says that when did the Plishtim block up what Avraham Avinu had dug was after Avraham passed away. Because only after Avraham passes away, in other words, after the Ava of Kedusha is no longer there, And now what the person is left is left with the mood of avo, the mood of openness, of expansiveness. That's when the plishtim, that's when the opposing side can come and take that mode which the person is in and use it in a not right way. However, the wells of Yitzchak, that the plishtim couldn't block up. Because since the digging of the wells of Yitzchak is, what is that? That's the Avodah of fear. It's the Avodah of the fear of Hashem, of the fear of Kedusha. In other words, fear of Hashem. It's a Kedusha-dik Avodah of seriousness and strictness and feeling the presence of Hashem and therefore being in awe and in fear of Hashem. That's why the plishtim, which the plishtim, they're the opposite side of the coin of chesed, of kedusha, of the openness. But so that's their field of opposition, where they have some power to try and create a distraction. Hashem creates one against the other. However, against Yitzchak, who's a totally different modality, a totally different set of tools of Avodas Hashem, which is Gevura and strictness and exactness, the Plishtim have no power against that. Every midah of Kedusha, this is an important rule, every midah in the opposite side, in the enemy side, which Hashem set up, only has the power to be in opposition to the exact midah, the exact modality that's opposing it in Kedusha. So if it's joy, the joy of negativity is an opposition to the joy of Kedusha. But here, once Yitzchak's aspect is blended into Avram's well, so the plishtim that represent the opposition to Avram, their opposition fades away. It doesn't take root. Not just the wells that Yitzchak, not just the wells that Yitzchak dug, the plishtim couldn't block up, but also the wells that Avram dug. Once Yitzchak, which he was chesed, and they do have a power against Avram, but once Yitzchak dug them from you, they didn't have any power. The explanation is like this. In general, when we talk about ahava, love has, one of the attributes of love is that there's a strong feeling of self. Because when we say, classically in Chassidus, we use the words yesh mi she'ohev. There is somebody who loves. Right? We say, I love something, so there's an I there that's loving. When it comes to yir, when it comes to fear and obedience, accepting the yoke of heaven, there's an aspect of bittul. And there's here too, just pointing out that there's a quote down below to the Sefer HaErkim, which was authored by Rabbi Alav Shalom, and there's in the Encyclopedia of Chabad Concepts, there's many pages on this concept, the difference between ahava, which has a sense of self vested in it, and yira, which there's no feeling of self, because yira is when somebody's scared of something. Even I'm going to try and use this example. Somebody's fearful of something, scared of a lion. The only thing that consumes him at that moment is the lion, the object of his fear. He doesn't feel himself being fearing. He feels the lion. With love, the person is connecting to that thing, drawing himself near to the thing, and there's a sense of self drawing in love to something else. This is a topic that can be spoken about at length, but the point here is that because ahava has a sense of self mixed in, whereas yira, fear, is bittul, is a lack of sense of self. So therefore, when the avodah is only with ahava and simcha, and that's towards Hashem, but since they're intrinsic and inherent within that, even when it's ahava to Hashem, there's a yeshus, there's a sense of self again, it's holy self. It's myself drawing close to Hashem. It's a big mitzvah. V'ahavta Hashem. But nonetheless, what if the content is removed from that, the shell is left. A person could, through that, come to simple yeshus, simple sense of self-being, and an expansiveness of kedusha can, which at the time of davening was amazing. It was an uplifted thing, but it could be that after that content is removed, he could still remain in that state of mind, in that state of feeling, and that could lead to an openness and an expansiveness in negativity. Heilalus and litzanus. However, when the Aveda is also with the fear of Hashem and the Kabbalah Seil and the acceptance of Yoke of Heaven, there's a true of bittul. There's a certain bittul therein, and that won't allow that the negative forces should be able to take his expansiveness and move it to a place of negativity. Simply speaking, when he's mindful that his Ava is, yes, his movement towards Hashem, but he's very aware of Hashem and doing it within the confines and within the parameters that Hashem wants. So Yira means he's mindful of Hashem and doesn't want to offend him, to use simple language. Yira means in Kabbalah, so you want to do what Hashem wants. You don't want Chas V'Shalom to do anything that's offensive to him. So when that's there, that's tempering the feeling of wide open expansiveness to Hashem with joy and with pleasure. That joy and pleasure now, though, is limited and controlled only to be towards Hashem, because you also have the awareness of Hashem and not do anything Chas V'Shalom that's going to be offensive to him. The balance. So now we understand why the wells of Avram, which he himself had dug, that the Plishtim could block up, because Avram was to an extreme. That's what we're saying, of Chesed, and that needed to be tempered with Yitzchak, because when Yitzchak then redug those same wells, the Plishtim didn't have any power to block it up. Because when the wells of Avram, which is the Aved of Ava and Simcha, of love and joy, has together with it also the digging of Yitzchak, which is a tenua, which is an expression of bittul and of fear and of Kabbalah Seil, of obedience. So then that's the winning combination. Then the chitzenim, those other sides, aren't able to usurp that, and therefore those wells, their flow never stopped. Vav. According to this, we'll understand that those wells that Avram dug, Yitzchak dug them from you, fundos nai, from you. However, whose wells are they? The Avram's well. According to this explanation of the Alter Rebbe and Teira, whose wells are they? The Avram's wells that get blocked up by the Plishtim, because the Aved of Avram, once Avram moves away, once the Kedusha moves away, that expansiveness can be usurped by the Plishtim, by the cynics and the party goers. No, but once you move in the Yitzchak and he digs it, no, then Avram's mode of service remains firm and unencumbered. But whose well is it? It's Avram's well. But it's Avram's well with the, so to speak, with the defense mechanism of Yitzchak. That's why, so that the Ava and Simcha can remain untainted. That's why my father explains, says the Rebbe, that the kavan of the Zer, when it says the Be'er of Yitzchak, is not that the actual well was Yitzchak's. The Ramah says that it was a well of Yitzchak, but it was Avram digging that well. No, it's a Be'er of Avram. But the Torah says that it calls it the well of Yitzchak because the power that keeps the well of Avram sustained, the sustenance of that, the kiyum of Avram's Aveda, is through the Aveda of Yitzchak. So it calls it Yitzchak. Zion. So now let's understand that the Ramaz is a very high level pirush. What is the teaching based on his teaching? So the explanation, according to the line of explanation that we explained above, but to put this into the Ramaz's pirush, how would Chassidus look at Ramaz's pirush? The concept of digging the wells in general is the whole well digging business. Actually, is not really an Abrahamic thing. It's in general finding the water that bubbles up from below. It's milmata l'mayla. That's in general the Aved of Yitzchak, of Gvura. As explained in many places, really the well digging is attributed to Yitzchak. So that's why the Ramaz says that really the well belongs to Yitzchak. The concept is kavagvura. It's Yitzchak's mode of gvura, of the water, finding water that's down and coming up. However, there's also in this case Avram dug it. It's really Yitzchak's thing, but Avram digs it and adds the dimension of Avram. And the Rabbi adds in the Zohar there it says not just that it doesn't just speak about the well. It says that the well is an edus, is a testimony. And that's why he calls it the testimony, the Be'er of Yitzchak, because the concept of testimony is to ensure the kiyum, and to ensure that whatever it is that's there should be sustained should be protected and sustained from something that threatens to harm it. In other words, it gives eidos, it gives testimony. What does as testimony have to do? You only need testimony when there are other versions of a story that come to create a question about, the veracity of the story that's given. So you need witnesses to come and sustain and protect and set the truth straight. So in other words, here we're talking about the inyan of kiyum in Be'er. In other words, according to all opinions, even according to the Torah, what created the sustenance and the eidos that this Be'er should be sustainable forever. We say that there are three things that are here forever to give testimony. It's Yitzchak's addition to that. However, what does it mean in Avodas Hashem, what the Ramaz was saying? Basically means that really the main Avodah is Ches, the main Avodah is Yira and Bittul, right? So really the Be'er is all about Yitzchak. And Yitzchak, that's what remains with us, the Avodah of Yitzchak. Obedience, Yira, fear of Hashem. However, because of the great virtue and advantage of Simcha, so you also need the Simcha to be injected within the service of Hashem of Yira and of Bittul. However, this Simcha has to be Behelim. This Simcha has to be in a concealed way. In other words, it's, as the Rabbi quotes here from Likutei Torah in Shmini Atzeres, that Yom Tov is joyous. Well, we always have to be joyous. Usually, the joy is incorporated within the Aveda, within the service of Hashem. We do the service joyously, but it's not the joy that's the main component. So in other words, based on the Ramaz, we would say that the main Be'er, the main service of Hashem is Yitzchak. Yitzchak's service also needs Simcha and mixed in there. So Avram digs the well, but really he's digging the well of Yitzchak. He is adding to the Aveda, the main Aveda, which is Yitzchak. That's Ramaz. However, says the Rebbe, from this, that's explained in Torah, as we explained, that through the digging of Yitzchak, the flow never stopped again. In other words, it's Avraham's wells that are being dug by Yitzchak. So from here is clear, is muchach, is imperative, that the addition of Yitzchak is that through him there's the sustenance and enduringness of the wells that Avraham digs. In other words, it's not Avram's injecting an added value to Yitzchak's Aveda. No, we're talking here about the main Aveda being Avraham, and Yitzchak contributing the factor of Yira and Kabbalah Yisrael, which enables the Ava and the Tainug and the Simcha, the benevolence and joy and expansiveness to remain on track. Which means, what's the difference? Which way you look at it? Is the Be'er of Yitzchak which Avram is digging, or is it a Be'er of Avram which Yitzchak is adding to? You know what the difference is? This means that the Aveda, de facto Aveda, is Kava Ava, love, Simcha, joy. As the Zohar says, Les Pulchana, there's no Aveda as powerful and important as the Aveda of love. Now, in order that the Simcha should be able to be enduring and properly focused and directioned, not to be usurped by Plishtim, you first have to have the Yira and the Kabbalah Yisrael. Because what that does is, when you first have Yira and Kabbalah Yisrael, there's a station identification. There are parameters within which your Ava and Simcha and expansiveness will be directed, and they won't go beyond those. Because anything beyond that will be Chas v'Shalom offensive to the king, to Hashem. And you've already prefaced that your journey of Ava, Simcha, and Tainug is motivated towards Hashem. So this really leaves us with it's a subtle, it's a Pirush in the Zohar, but there's in Avodas Hashem, there's a very subtle but fundamental difference. Is it Yitzchak, who's our main focus, and we make sure to, within the strictness and exactness and gvura, we inject some ava because it needs ava as well to be well complemented and well rounded? Or is it that the default is the ava and the simcha and the tainug, the avram, benevolence and expansiveness? But in order to make sure that that's kept on track, you have to inject it with the component of Yitzchak. And more than that, Sikha finishes, there has to be conceptually the preface of being in the presence of Hashem and the Yira and accepting the yoke of Hashem, and within that context, the Simcha and the Ava has to flow. But if you wake up in the morning, which mode should you try and turn on? I'm adding now. Which mode should you try and turn on? You should try and turn on the Avraham mode, and then inject it with the Yitzchak. Make sure it stays on track. Kol Tov.